I wasn't angry. I was still. The kind of stillness that comes after too many years of watching patterns repeat themselves in offices that talk about fairness but reward the opposite. My name is Celine Harlow, and for nearly 2 decades, I've worked in enterprise software solutions. I'm not flashy. I don't lead town halls or post success updates on Slack. I bring in contracts. I clean up messes before they reach escalation. And this year, I personally secured $11.8 million in new revenue. On the Friday before the holidays, I opened my final paycheck, not because I was excited, but because it's what I do every year. A quiet ritual. One last check before the year closes. Everything looked fine at first. Salary, tax deductions, benefits, until I saw the number that mattered most. My bonus. It wasn't gone. That would have been too obvious. No, it was just smaller. Quietly, subtly, smaller. No explanation, no memo, just a figure that didn't make sense, not for someone who had delivered what I did. I didn't email anyone. I didn't ask questions. I'd seen this move before. Repackaged cuts with clever labels like compensation realignment or team rebalancing. And I knew this wasn't a mistake. It was a message. But they sent it to the wrong person. The weekend passed like it always did, quietly, methodically. But beneath my routine was a new thread of calculation. On Monday, I brought up my old pay stubs, the internal deal tracker, and my personal notes. Same base pay, same benefit deductions. But last year's bonus? Nearly 3 times the current figure. That year, I'd closed $8.2 million. This year, $11.80. The numbers didn't lie, but they were being silenced. I said nothing. No complaints to HR, no legal CCs. I already knew what the answers would be. This is part of a broader adjustment. We're aligning legacy discrepancies. We've moved to a team-based bonus framework. Empty phrases I'd heard repackaged before. Still, I wanted confirmation. It came, though not directly. On Tuesday, as I walked past the shared kitchen, I heard one of the junior analysts on a call. She laughed and said, "Celine was everywhere this year. I think she carried half the board." I kept walking, didn't flinch, but inside I clocked it. People knew. Then I remembered an email from 2 months earlier, an internal memo sent by Damon, my new manager. He had only joined that quarter, but had wasted no time announcing changes to contribution assessment. Less focus on individual targets, more emphasis on team dynamics. At the time, it read like a corporate filler. Now it read like pretext. There had been no meetings, no vote, just a system recalibration that quietly erased attribution. And mine, most of all. The next morning, Damon called a short team sync in one of the smaller meeting rooms. No slides. Just him, standing in front of a whiteboard he never touched. "We pulled through a tough year," he said. "A lot of teamwork, not just solo wins. Some of you might notice adjustments in your year-end numbers. That's not performance-related, just a reflection of how we now measure success." He didn't look at me when he said it, but I noticed Tara, one of our newer hires, nod quietly. No one asked questions. No one made eye contact. The room emptied with that strange silence offices wear when something unsaid hangs in the air. As I walked out, James from finance brushed my elbow. He waited until the hallway cleared, then murmured, "Just so you know, your bonus was routed through the general pool this year, not your individual bracket." I raised an eyebrow. "That's not how we've done it before," he added, then paused. "Damon submitted his separately." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. That told me everything. That evening, I opened my private project tracker and listed every deal I'd handled in the past year. 11 in total. Then I opened a second column for everyone who had been present in key emails, contract approvals, final calls. Damon's name appeared in exactly 2, both times after the deal had closed. Yet somehow, he'd claimed oversight. I didn't explode. I didn't even raise my voice. I just started taking notes, and I stopped waiting for fairness to find me. By mid-January, something shifted. Not loudly, not all at once, but in the quiet, coordinated way only corporate environments can master, where erasure doesn't come in the form of pink slips or accusations, but in invisible reassignments and the steady removal of your name. It started with a poster in the front lobby. Q4 highlights. Nothing dramatic, just a new design pinned by the welcome desk. A splash of logos, client quotes, smiling faces from meetings I hadn't attended, and beneath all of it, small white print, led by commercial ops. That was my work. Veritone, Leatrix, Quantisphere, deals I had initiated, pursued, and closed. In previous quarters, posters like that bore names. The company prided itself on attribution, on showcasing the individuals behind the wins, but not this time. This time the message was clear. The face of your effort was now a department, and the department belonged to Damon. He walked by while I was standing there, glanced at the board, smiled like he was admiring his own reflection, then walked on. It was precise, bloodless, and intentional. The following week, he started appearing on client calls. Not at the start, not when the negotiations were still full of landmines. He never joined the calls where pricing pushback had to be managed, or when compliance questions derailed scope. No, he came in right near the finish line, when everything was clean, structured, and ready. Looping myself in, just in case they ask about post-sale support, he'd message me. No request, no space for me to push back. At first, I tolerated it, told myself it was normal, a new manager trying to show face. It wasn't a threat, it was just optics. Until the LXA call. I'd been working with their regional director for months. 8 separate calls, over 24 emails, custom diagrams, revised rollout schedules. I knew their pain points better than our own implementation team. The call was meant to last 5 minutes, just a final timeline confirmation. Damon arrived late. He stayed 10 minutes, and in those 10 minutes, he told a story that didn't belong to him. He spoke of how we shaped the solution, how his team stayed late to resolve compliance bottlenecks, how our restructure made delivery smoother. He didn't credit the team. He didn't credit me. He just narrated the final chapter like he'd written the book. I said nothing, just muted myself and watched the client's face. A flicker of discomfort crossed it, like he wasn't sure if Damon was exaggerating or simply confused. But he didn't interrupt. Neither did I. Because I needed Damon to finish writing his fiction, so I could start building my record of truth. Later that week, I passed a breakout room and paused. Inside, Damon was reviewing slides with Tara and one of the new associates. It was material for the upcoming client summit, a session I had led for the past 3 years. My name wasn't on the invite. I stood outside the glass wall for 5 seconds. No one turned around. No one noticed. Then I walked away. But the silence was beginning to splinter. The next morning, I received an email from Angela, the procurement director at Veritone. We'd worked together for years, since before Damon even joined the company. Hey, Celine! Quick check. Damon reached out to ask if future service questions should go to him. Has your role shifted? I didn't panic. I replied simply, thanks for flagging. You're welcome to contact either of us. Then I called her directly. Angela wasn't suspicious, just confused. She said Damon mentioned I was stepping back from direct client engagement to focus on internal strategy. I told her that wasn't true. She paused. That didn't sound like you, she said. Glad I checked. After I hung up, I didn't forward the call notes to Damon. I didn't confront him. I didn't report anything to HR. Instead, I made another decision. I cleared my calendar. Every optional training, every team coaching roundtable, every non-billable side project I'd once supported out of goodwill. Gone. If I was being measured by numbers now, then I'd be nothing but numbers. No more context, no more mentoring, no more favors, just revenue. Let them weigh that. That Thursday, James from finance stopped me near the elevators. He waited until no one was nearby. You didn't hear this from me, he said, but someone tried to move your name off the Q3 revenue attribution file. There were no system changes, no traceable edits, just a void. Someone had tried to scrub my signature off the ledger, but someone had seen it. And that meant I wasn't alone in seeing the shape of this. Martin wasn't just taking credit. He was orchestrating a quiet replacement, removing me deal by deal, name by name, thread by thread. And it was working because it was quiet, but not quiet enough. The unraveling didn't happen with an explosion. It started with a whisper, a correction really. It came from a client. Dominic Wade, head of enterprise programs at Westhold Group, wasn't the type to tolerate inefficiency or ego. I'd spent nearly 2 months slowly building rapport with him, long emails, exploratory calls, cautious alignment on priorities. Nothing was formal yet, but momentum was growing. It was one of those complex, high-stakes prospects that couldn't be rushed. Then, one morning, I got a calendar invite. Initial strategy call, Martin Clive with Westhold. No mention of me, no CC, no explanation. I stared at it for a full minute before shutting my laptop. He hadn't just tried to redirect the account. He'd gone ahead without me. Damon didn't know Dominic, hadn't read his notes, hadn't joined a single exploratory session. But there he was, hosting the very first strategic meeting. 10 minutes after the call ended, Dominic emailed me directly. Appreciate the introduction to your colleague, but we'd prefer to continue dialogue directly with you if that's all right. That was it. No emotion, just correction. Clean, clear, precise. That same afternoon, I saw James from finance pass Damon's office. He paused for a moment, long enough to register something, then kept walking. But that glance said everything. Something had cracked. By the following morning, word had spread. Quietly. Tara came by my desk, pretending to return a shared notebook. She placed it down and hesitated. Just so you know, she said without looking up, he's saying you were too overloaded to take on Westhold. That's why he stepped in. I didn't reply. She added, but Leah from Quantisphere asked last week why someone else was representing her account. She said it didn't feel right. That wasn't an accusation, it was a signal. The system, once so willing to look away, was now beginning to look closer. Then came a move I didn't expect, from Aylin, one of the junior attorneys on the legal team. She came by casually and asked, did you personally handle the Veriton negotiation? Yes, I said. She nodded. Just checking. The internal archive doesn't say. 2 days later, I received a shared folder. No note, just time-stamped summaries of 3 major contracts, Veriton, Quantisphere, and Linxa, each one cross-referenced with original emails, meeting invites, internal call summaries. My name was in every one, every milestone, every signature. Aylin hadn't said a word. She didn't need to. People were watching, not because I shouted, but because I didn't. And in that silence, the contrast sharpened. Damon was everywhere, talking louder, pushing harder, showing up in rooms he hadn't earned his way into. He narrated wins that weren't his. Streamlined visibility under vague terms like shared attribution. He called it team alignment. Clients called it confusion. The next mistake he made was bigger. He tried to take over a new deal that hadn't even reached the proposal stage. A deal I was nursing, carefully and methodically. Introduced through a former Linxa contact, early-stage calls were going well. No promises yet, but trust was forming, and that's fragile currency. Then a client-side contact looped me into a forwarded invite. Initial planning call, Damon Clive. I wasn't included on the original invite. I was just passed along as a FYI. Dominic's response came in under 10 minutes. We'd prefer to continue with Celine, thanks. Short, firm, unapologetic. That same day, Aylin sent a formal request to Damon's assistant, asking for full meeting minutes from 3 recent client calls, ones where deal attribution had been murky. She CC'd me. Damon replied, terse and vague. Not sure what that's for, but happy to share what we have. Later, a separate note from Aylin landed in my inbox. Just covering gaps, some things aren't matching. By the end of that week, the gap became too wide to ignore. Another client copied me back into a billing thread Damon had tried to keep to himself. Again, no confrontation, just reinstatement. People weren't pushing him out. They were pulling me back in. The illusion was fracturing. Damon hadn't just overreached. He'd underestimated the very people he tried to sideline. Clients, colleagues, finance, legal, quiet operators who may not speak loudly, but who know what they're watching. By the time Dominic escalated his concerns directly to Ruth Chen, our commercial director, It was no longer about one account. It was about a pattern. Ruth called a closed-door meeting. Damon opened with a smile, calculated and tight. "Just a quick sync," he said. "Seems like there's been confusion around client coverage. I figured we'd align directly." Ruth didn't smile. "I'm not here for alignment," she said. "I'm here for clarity." She turned to me. "Celine, did you initiate West Hold?" "Yes." "Were you informed Damon would be taking the lead?" "No." Then she turned to him. He shifted in his seat. There was concern she had too much on her plate. I stepped in to keep momentum. That's all. Ruth didn't blink. "Then explain why West Hold's lead specifically requested her after the first call, and why their summary included details of meetings only she attended." The silence that followed was longer than it should have been. I didn't fill it. I didn't need to. When the meeting ended, Ruth walked out first. Damon didn't look at me, just nodded once, tight-lipped and pale. By Monday, Aylin issued a memo to legal, finance, and commercial ops, summarizing discrepancies in deal ownership across 4 major accounts. She didn't name names, but the pattern was unmistakable. Damon's handprints were everywhere. And now, so were the receipts. The audit didn't come with flashing lights or breaking news. It began the way real accountability often does in corporate life, quietly, internally, and under the radar of those who didn't know to be afraid. That Wednesday, the first wave of internal data requests went out. Ruth's doing legal, then finance, then ops. Not public, not discussed. But for those of us who'd been watching the tremors build, we recognized the shift. By mid-morning, mine arrived. "Please provide project documentation, meeting records, and client communications from March through December for Veriton, Quantisphere, Linxa, and West Hold." I didn't panic. I didn't scramble. I had everything. Notes, calendar entries, sign-off emails, call transcripts. I'd been collecting them not to fight, but to keep a clean trail. By lunch, I sent back a compressed folder. Organized, annotated, time-stamped. 2 hours later, Damon was summoned to the executive floor. Not by Ruth this time, by Graham, the CFO. A name that rarely surfaced unless something had gone seriously off-book. He didn't return to his desk that day. His assistant looked pale when she showed up the next morning, spending most of it in HR. I didn't ask. I didn't need to. The system wasn't collapsing. It was recalibrating. Later that afternoon, I was invited to a follow-up session, this time with reps from both legal and finance. There was no confrontation, no grand inquisition, just methodical questions. Was Damon present during the final Veriton negotiation? No. Did he review the Linxa addendum before submission? No. Was he on the Quantisphere pricing call? No, but he was copied after it concluded. They wrote it all down. No judgment, no expression. Just facts being collected. Finally, and for the right reasons. That Friday, a message went out to all client service teams. In the interest of maintaining transparency in client attribution and bonus review protocols, we are implementing temporary oversight adjustments. Further updates to follow. No names were mentioned. But by Monday, Damon's access was quietly revoked from 3 major client folders. I was re-added to all of them. He didn't message me. He didn't show up to our usual Friday team sync. No catch-up invite. No hallway encounter. His presence simply thinned, like fog retreating after sunrise. But Tara came by that afternoon. She poured coffee next to me like it was just another slow afternoon, stirred her cup in silence, then said almost too casually, "They asked if I had worked on those accounts." I didn't look at her. "I told them the truth," she added. "They were yours, always were." That was all. That same week, another memo circulated, this time from legal. A proposal to formally track contribution history in all bonus evaluations moving forward. Anonymous, neutral in tone. But built, line by line, on the very gaps Damon had manipulated. There was no declaration of wrongdoing, no apology. But something had changed. Damon's strategic support role quietly ended. No announcement, no all-hands farewell. His profile disappeared from the company directory by the following Friday. No one said anything. No one needed to. He hadn't been fired. He'd been erased in the very way he'd once tried to erase me. And still, I said nothing. I kept working, until Ruth appeared by my desk one Thursday afternoon. She stood with her arms crossed, unreadable as ever. "We'd like you to consider stepping into a leadership role," she said. "Same scope, expanded title, increased visibility. Compensation will adjust accordingly." I nodded. "I appreciate the offer." "You don't have to answer now." "I won't take long," I said. "I've already thought about it." The next morning, I declined. Politely, finally. "I'll support the transition," I said, "but I won't be taking the role." Ruth didn't ask why. She just said, "Let me know how we can make the exit smooth." The truth? I had made up my mind weeks earlier, back when Damon first tried to claim credit for West Hold. Around that time, I'd received a message from an old colleague at Linksa. He'd left to start a consulting firm, small, clean, low noise. He'd reached out with a single line, "If you're ever tired of politics, I've got clean work and clean books." We had coffee once. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't need to. He just said, "You've spent your career fixing messes that shouldn't exist. What if you built something that didn't need fixing?" At the time, I didn't answer, but I already knew. So I gave 4 weeks' notice, long enough to finish what I'd started, short enough not to be talked out of it. When Tara heard, she came by again. "You're really leaving?" "Yes." "They'll replace you." I nodded. "They'll succeed," I said, "but they won't rebuild what they erased." Her face softened, not regret, not admiration, just clarity. By my final week, every handoff was complete, every document accounted for. On my desk sat one last folder, each deal categorized, every note dated and signed. I left it where I knew Ruth would find it, not as a message, just a fact. I didn't owe the system anything, but I wasn't going to leave it broken either. My last day came without ceremony. No cake in the break room, no farewell speech. Just a quiet Friday, emails tapering off, people pretending not to notice the cleared desk beside them. That was fine by me. At 4 p.m., I shut down my computer, locked the final folder, and slid it into Ruth's office. Every deal closed, every thread tied. I didn't leave with resentment. I left with precision. On my way out, I passed Tara. She stood by the printer, pretending to read something. "You're not going to say anything?" she asked. "I already did," I replied. "I stayed. I delivered. That was everything." She nodded. "You left something behind." "I meant to." 2 weeks later, James forwarded me a message. "Quantisphere is pausing renewal talks until they understand who's leading now that Celine's gone. Not a threat, just leverage." And that was the difference. I hadn't left to make noise. I'd left to stop being erased. And in doing so, I'd left behind something systems can't overwrite. A name they couldn't remove.